Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support. The story begins during the Bakumatsu era. There was a sickly girl who was dying in a samurai clan. A divine revelation was bestowed. After many generations, a blessed body will be born to a sage who will save the world. Soon after, the miraculously recovered girl gathered those who worshipped the god alongside her to form a congregation. Perhaps because they originated from a samurai clan, their philosophy is rather warrior-like. According to them, miracles are self-determined. Say hello to Mummy everyone. The scene changes to a view of a magnificent-looking mansion. A man with prayer beads in his hand is speaking. Among us we pass on a teaching he preaches. This man was the founder of God and man as one. His name was Yamagami Judo. He sits in the middle of a pool on a throne, surrounded by his fellow followers and angel statues. He tells them that they cannot fall under your umbrella. This was directed to the bald man who has a tattoo on his head. The tattoo is translated to mean founder. Judo continues to say that as God's teaching forbid violence and conflict, to forbid obtaining wealth from those methods, to value inside all humans, exits part of God to become as one with God. But the bald man cuts him off saying, bullshit. The bald man who was giving off major Big Daddy vibes was the founder of another religion group called the God and Earth Reverence Church. He was called Urabe Sutra. He repeats what Judo said about value and property. He tells them that it was just an excuse to gather donations by telling believers to throw away wealth. With such wickedness, to say that God exists in you is absolutely disgusting. I want to throw up, said Urabe as he stands with massive booty cheeks ripe for collection. Judo then questions him by saying that such words of praise, what kind of teaching might the God and Earth Reverence Church have? Judo tells him that it was really simple. Rely on God for nothing, using your own body realize your desires yourself. Essentially, miracles are self-determined. Miracles are self-determined, as their God Matama-sama is the world's strongest, greatest, and absolute God. Our muscle daddy grips his fist so hard that an aura started to form around him. He continues to tell Judo that the favor inhabiting the bodies of her believers rests as a power that is unwatched. Judo remains silent for a moment after hearing those words, but he soon bursts into laughter. The world's strongest and greatest, he shouted as he asks our muscle daddy if he was child while still laughing madly. He begins to stand up from his throne, telling him that it was good to have so much faith in his so-called Matama-sama favor. Judo decides to display a miracle of his own to our muscle daddy. He claps his hands together and his feet could be seen hovering over the water. Judo was in a praying position while being right above the waters as if he was floating by divine powers. His followers couldn't believe what they were seeing and called it a miracle. They continued to cheer on that Judo was able to stand over the water. It was something that flesh and blood from humans couldn't do. A wire trap could be seen in the ceiling which was attached to the back of Judo, but most of his followers were too blind to see that. As they continued to cheer him on as a miracle, they even go so far as to proclaim him as their one true God. After hearing the cheers from his followers, Judo asks a question to Muscle Daddy, asking him how it felt to witness a miracle right before your very eyes. But our Muscle Daddy wasn't like anyone else. He calls out that there was a piano wire attached to him and that it was no miracle. He then shouts out a name, Kayamaru. A loud crunching sound could be heard once that name was called. Muscle Mommy has arrived, gentlemen. Feast your eyes on this magnificent sight. All hail Muscle Mommy. Comment below Muscle Mommy. Kayamaru had finally arrived and had pulled the doorknob right of the door with ease. She was the department head of the God and Earth Reverence Church, Urabe Kayamaru. Muscle Daddy then orders her to show the sham religion what a real miracle looks like. She proceeds to throw away the doorknob to the side and took a step on the ring surrounding the water, which began to crack under her Muscle Mommy aura. The author has blessed us with another look at our Muscle Mommy. Let's us take a moment to appreciate the artwork. Judo was surprised to see her stand still. He then asks her if she was going to perform the same miracle, which was impossible if no preparations was done. But his eyes soon gains back his pupils as he witnessed something shocking. Massive explosions could be seen at Kayamaru's feet as the water below her started to flow everywhere. Judo's followers were shocked to see that she was able to stand on water, which was the stand miracle as Judo. But one of them realizes something as they took a closer look at her miracle. They discovered that Kayamaru was just constantly kicking the water so fast that their eyes couldn't keep up, giving off One Punch Man vibes. The followers continued to be amazed as they wondered if a human could really do something like that, making it a different kind of miracle. Judo started to panic as he could see his followers being amazed. He then decides to show off another miracle called God and Man floating as one. which was just being in a lotus position and raised higher, into the air, but his pupils returned once again as he looks up and sees something alarming above him. Kayamaru had appeared high above him with her leg raised up high. Her face looked like a predator about to chomp down on its prey. She looks at him with a serious tone in her eyes. "Your miracle can only go that high?" she asks, as Judo started to sweat as he wonders if what she did was really a miracle or just a really high jump. But his thoughts were literally smashed to bits as Kayamaru spin kicks in the air with ease. He lands head first into the pool of water. His followers called out to him with concern and shock that their founder had lost. Muscle Daddy began to speak out to his followers, telling them that the miracle they just witnessed can be performed by anyone with training, meaning that miracles are self-determined, and that their god Matama-sama will bestow upon them the true miracle of transcendental power. He continues to tell that their teachings on obtaining power into the God and Earth reverence church, hence they must convert. Judo's followers began to beg our Muscle Daddy to let them join his religion instead. They continued to chant the words, get big, as Kayamaru just mindlessly stares into space. Muscle Daddy then approaches her and thanks her for the job well done as they have now gained more believers, but she tells him to keep his thanks. Her face brightens with a bright smile as she tells him to hurry and let her see her little brother. But a shocking revelation came to Muscle Daddy. He looks down with concern and tells Kayamaru that there was something he needed to tell her. She exclaims in excitement and asked if he had finally agreed to the marriage between her and her little brother. But Muscle Daddy tells her that was not it and that what she wanted was a legal issue. With a calm and serious tone, he tells her that her younger brother had passed on. Her eyes opened wide as the words entered her mind. "What?" she said as the room grew silent. The followers watched in silence until blood began to drip on the floor. A hand was grabbing onto Muscle Daddy's face with blood flowing everywhere as he pants heavily. The hand had belonged to Kayamaru, who was holding him up with ease. The followers began to stare in disbelief until Kayamaru tells him to give him back. She gives off a serious face as she continues to tell him to give back her little brother. Muscle Daddy tried to explain to her that her younger brother had went on a mission for their congregation, and had went on a journey to Matama-sama's side. But he did not die but instead went to the typical other world. But who gives a shit? Kayamaru tells him, her face filled with more seriousness as she tells him that she was going to marry her younger brother. Muscle Daddy could only think that she was not getting it. He noted that their congregation was nothing but meatheads, but Kayamaru was a step above the rest and wondered how things had gotten like this. She started to look for something in her pants and began to pull out a bunch of photos. She tells Muscle Daddy to look at the photos that she carries with her everywhere she went. It was her precious collection. The photos contained images of her younger brother from young and sometimes in the toilet, and even when he was bathing. Kayamaru continues to tell Muscle Daddy that her younger brother would follow her around when he was small, calling her Onee-chan, and that they would get married when he got bigger. Kayamaru begins to pant heavily and blushes heavily. Muscle Daddy tells her to calm down since he was no longer of this world. But Kayamaru was in her brother-obsessed mood. She swings him around while calling her younger so cute. Muscle Daddy begs him to stop and finally tells her that there was a way to meet him. It was for her to be transferred to another world as well. But soon a crack sound is heard. Muscle Daddy was finally thrown outside a window. He screams in horror as he began to drop fast towards the ground. Kayamaru Simplified watched from the broken window. She repeats the words "another world transfer." Bubbles began to form in the water. Judo was finally dragged out from the water. Kayamaru flings him to the side. As he coughs up water, he tells her that he had almost died, but Kayamaru calls him a scammer asshole. Before asking him what another world transfer was supposed to, he stares at her in silence before explaining. The scene changes to our old friend Truck-kun, who is the main character in almost everywhere Isekai manga. A driver was seen dozing off, but he soon realizes something. There was a figure on the road he was driving on. Is there someone in the middle of the freeway? He shouts just as the figure was revealed to be Kayamaru. She looks at the incoming truck with dead eyes and a serious face. The driver soon realizes that he couldn't press the brakes anymore in time. So instead Kayamaru became the brakes for the truck as she slammed her body against it. The truck was instead sent to another world as it flips through the air, and soon crashes. Judo shouts at her from the bridge and told her that she was supposed to die. But Kayamaru tells him that people don't die from getting hit by a truck. He continues to tell her that she couldn't transfer to another world unless she dies. He continues to beg Kayamaru to die as she stood still. From that day onwards, Kayamaru became determined to die by trying anything. A crazy man appears with a knife in his hand. It pierces something but somehow snapped in half. Kayamaru had attempted to die by getting stabbed in the stomach by a street thug. She had jumped down a cliff and fought a bear. She even consumed large amounts of drugs and burning charcoal inside a car. She even resorted to covering herself in gasoline and lighting herself on fire. She worked at an extremely abusive company and joined a death march, working day and night for an entire month, aiming for death from overwork, but none of it had any effect on Kayamaru's body of steel. Judo appears with a bunch of muscle daddies behind him. He tells her that they had fully recognized the extent of her life force, and that to reach her goal they had no other methods remaining. Kayamaru could now been seen buried inside a barrel. This was the God and Earth Reverence Church's rites of creation. Muscle Daddy explains to her that it was originally only for the next founder to undergo this sacred rite and that she had no such qualifications at all. He continues to explain to her the reasoning behind the sacred ritual, but she decides to cut him off. "You gonna kill me or what?" she said with a serious and dead look on her face. Muscle Daddy begins to shout out, "We call upon the our one true God. We call upon the Matama-sama, heave ho, heave ho." They shouted as they stood near a cliff. The group was carrying Kayamaru while she was still inside the barrel. Her face was filled with joy and a little bit of perverseness. As she finally realizes that she was going to another world, "Bon voyage Kayamaru-sama," the group shouted as they finally threw her down. A big splash is seen as the group continued to watch from the cliff. Judo then asks Muscle Daddy if this was going to kill her, but he looks up in the air and tells him that it won't do. Tears drip down his face as he thought about her overflowing passion for her younger brother along with the power of love, but it turns out that both men were crying due to the fact of how scary she was to both of them. But deep in Muscle Daddy's mind, he absolutely did not want Kayamaru to go to her younger brother's side. Kayamaru could now be seen still stuck in the barrel. She had appeared in a whole different place. She looks around and wonders if this was supposed to be another world, but she brushes that thought away as it looked familiar to the countryside. A shadow soon covers her and she turns to see what it was. It was a massive reptile-looking dinosaur mofo. Kayamaru continues to stare at it while still being stuck in the barrel. Muscle Daddy was concerned about Kayamaru's strength just as the reptile dinosaur began to attack. It was because her strength was a cheat itself. Kayamaru manages to break free from the barrel and knocked out the beast with a single punch. Her cheat was so strong that she didn't even need Matama-sama if she were to meet her younger brother. Then his mission and their congregation's divine mandate, all of it will come to ruin. Kayamaru had managed to easily overwhelm the beast as she stood victorious over its corpse. She looks from beyond the cliff and knew that her younger brother Yukito was somewhere in this world. A smile grew on her face as she spoke these words. "Right now Onee-chan's coming to get you." She continues to sit around saying that Yukito was somewhere in this world. She tells him to wait for her as she will soon find him. She acts out about how he would say "I love you" the moment she appears in front of him, and that they will get married. Kayamaru was ready to accept the part that Yukito has, a part that every guy has, if you catch my drift. She screams at the top of her lungs while being on top of multiple dead beasts. "I'm ready to get pregnant." She continues to chant Yukito's name to the point when she started to blush heavily. She soon calms herself down while breathing hard. She was getting wet just thinking about it. This is what the author wrote, not me guys. She soon realizes that the first thing she needed to do was information gathering. A huge fire could be seen in the distance. Villagers are running away as their town is set in fire. They struggled to get out of the town as the fire had spread everywhere. They were calling out for help any way they could. A voice calls out to Naya as a hand pulls another. Two young kids, a boy and a girl, are seen running away together. The boy was called Noru while the young girl was called Naya. He tells her to not let go of his hand and to follow him. But Naya asks him about how their entire village was suddenly set on fire. Noru tells her that he didn't know what had happened as by the time he realized it, the village was already on fire. They continued to run away as they needed to find a safe place, but Noru soon bumps into something hard. He holds his face in pain as he asks the person why she was just standing there and not running away. Kayamaru appears with her muscles flexed and asked the kids if they had seen her younger brother. Noru was too stunned to speak. He breaks out of the trance and tells Kayamaru that she needed to get out of here due to the fire, but she remains adamant in finding her brother as she explains to Noru that he was her fiancé. She pulls out a photo of him sleeping in his pajamas while holding onto a teddy bear. She then asks if he was pretty. Noru reluctantly agrees but immediately snaps at Kayamaru, wondering why she was showing them a photo when there was a fire going on. Kayamaru explains that when she was exploring other countries and remote regions, the local people rebelled and many times entire settlements were burned to the ground. She thinks about how the village being set on fire was a familiar scene. Noru could only wonder about what she was saying before Naya calls out to him. She asks him what was wrong and who he was talking to. Noru tells her that it was nothing and that he had just met a crazy woman. Kayamaru takes a closer look at Naya and realizes that she was blind, but it was then that Noru realizes something was wrong. He immediately grabs onto Naya and flung themselves away. He yells out, "Watch out!" Just as a huge explosion appears in front of them, the kids fall to the ground just as a voice could be heard laughing out loud. A woman with two very big reasons to like her appears. She shouts out, "Burn, burn," while laughing out loud. Noru protects Naya and questions who the weird lady was. He wonders if she was the one who was burning the village. The lady asks Noru if he didn't know who she was. She then introduces herself as the Archon of Fire, Lord Hephaestus. Both Noru and Naya were alarmed. To discover who she was, Naya began to recall who exactly she was. A unit directly under the Emperor's command of the Imperial City Army, rumored to be a group of xenomorphic superhuman. Noru yells at her about why she was doing this, but Hap tells him that not long ago, the Imperial capital was destroyed by an Archon's rebellion. The Emperor was dead too. Since then the country had become a battle which the Warring States period began. Hap had then decided to take control of this village, but the village chiefs didn't agree to her demands, so she decided to show them what she could do. Noru remains silent overhearing her horrible excuse, but he soon opens his mouth to blame her. Her reply was a straight kick into our little man's body. Naya calls out to Noru in concern. Hap continues to tell him that half the people in this village will be killed and will serve as an example, where the others would be slaves. Since the weak follow the strong, that's how the world works, she says. While showing off her fire skills, Noru tries to stand up as he tells her to leave Naya alone as he didn't care about what would happen to him. A true man, Hap tells him that he was being annoying, as he reminded her of a guy called Yukito. She recalls that even though he was a weak person, people for some reason would think he was equal to the Archons. Hap began to feel pissed off about recalling Yukito's face and decided to make Noru into a slave. She then proceeds to burn everything right here right now, but a voice calls out to her. Kayamaru appears with her clothes slightly burnt. She wore a calm expression on her face as she asks Hap if she knew her brother. Awkward silence filled with burning village as everyone stared at Kayamaru. Haps was surprised to see that Kayamaru was fine as she made sure to turn her to charcoal. Kayamaru continues to question her if she knew where her brother Yukito was, but Haps decides to not answer someone who was about to die. She flings a fireball straight towards Kayamaru, who sees it coming. She turns into demon mode and kicks the fireball right in its ball. The fireball explodes in midair. It shocks Haps and the kids. Kayamaru explains that if you cut off the air with a kick, then the flames will be extinguished. That is the law of nature. Kayamaru then poses in a high kick stance in front of them. Haps began to panic as she couldn't believe what she just saw. Any superpower is meaningless in the face of overwhelming force, because miracles are done by force. Haps shouts at Kayamaru to not F with her. She begins to cast even more flames, telling her that the Archons should become the gods of this world. Kayamaru's reply was simply a face straight to her ugly face. She had entered demon mode once again, sending Haps flying through the air with a single punch. Haps was knocked out as she crashed. The kids stared with open mouths as Kayamaru questions Haps about God. "My only god is my brother Yukito," she proclaimed as her fighter spirit appears around her. Haps continued to lay on the ground flat. After tasting the wonderful punch from Muscle Mommy, she soon regains consciousness and said it was impossible. She gets up and wonders how there was a human that was stronger than her. She swears that it's impossible and that she was going to kill Muscle Mommy right now, but her eyes widen as she looks at what stood in front of her. Kayamaru was unleashing an ungodly amount of Muscle Mommy energy in front of Haps. Her eyes continued to shine bright, like a diamond in the sky. She towers over Haps as she continues to lay on the ground staring at her. Haps could only think of her actions being useless as her instincts were telling her something. "Surrender, you can't win," was written all over her face along with the print of Kayamaru's fist. Muscle Mommy begins her interrogation asking Haps if she knew her younger brother Yukito as she had just called him weak. Kayamaru glares at her asking what she meant by him being weak, but Haps immediately throws herself towards Kayamaru and hugs her tightly, just like how I imagine most of us would do if we were in the same situation. She starts to call Kayamaru Onee-sama. She cries out to her that she had finally found a person that she could truly respect, so she continues to beg Muscle Mommy for permission to be called Onee-sama. The kids could only look in awe, except for the little girl. She is blind. Haps continues to argue that in this world, strength is everything, as her face is filled with determination and her fist raised high up. She continues to proclaim that Kayamaru was stronger than anyone she knew, and that Haps was willing to follow her for the rest of her life. But Muscle Mommy grabs her by the collar, telling her that she had made fun of her younger brother. This sin is worthy of death. Muscle Mommy looks ready to eat someone up as she continues to glare at Haps. She immediately tells her that about her younger brother Yukito. She started to praise him, saying that she knew he was different from everyone else from the beginning, even going so far to say that he was really shining and has an amazing aura, and that she could even feel the charisma. An amazing god, simply divine, Haps shouts. Kayamaru's face began to break down. A satisfied look came across her face after hearing the many compliments she gave about her younger brother. She lets her go, telling her that she understood it well. She begins to compliment her younger brother as well, saying that he wasn't just charismatic but that his cuteness and loveliness was also divine. She tells Haps that when she sees him, his divinity will blind her. Haps looks at her with a smile and constantly agreed to whatever Muscle Mommy said. But Noru spoke out asking them to wait for a moment. He shouts at them on why Kayamaru was getting along with Haps. He complains to her that she had burned down their village and killed everyone along with it. She had even tried to kill Kayamaru, but Naya pulls onto his sleeve and tells him to wait. She explains to him that the smell of smoke was fading and that it could mean that the fire was out. Noru was surprised to hear this just as a heavy footstep appeared. A group of men holding buckets in their hands appeared while wearing a white long coat with certain characters written on it. Noru was alarmed to see these guys and wondered who they were, and when they came, "OSU," shouted one of the member, "as you ordered we put out all the fire." The group of men shouted together in unison. One of the members continued to report that all the villagers were safe. Noru continues to be stunned just as a hand appears calling out to him. A group of villagers appear from amongst the ruins of their burnt village. They called out to Noru and Naya, asking them if they were okay since the fire was put out. They told the little kids that almost no one was hurt and that they were all right. Noru began to tear up upon seeing that his fellow villagers were doing okay. A heavy footstep appears once again with an order to listen. Haps shouts at the top of her lungs, "We, Olympus, submit to this lady." She orders her men to follow Muscle Mommy. She then declares that if anyone has any complaints, then they should step forward. But none of the men stood forward as they held their positions. "All right," Haps shouted. "From today on, Muscle Mommy is our new leader," she proclaimed. The group of men bowed their heads towards Muscle Mommy, telling her to treat them well. They began to chant her name out loud. "Muscle Mommy, Muscle Mommy, comment below Muscle Mommy." Kayamaru holds a smile on her face as the group continues to chant her name loudly. She then decides to pull something out. "Look at this," she said as she held a photo of her younger brother sleeping when he was a kid. She tells them with an excited look on her face that this was Yukito, her beloved younger brother, whom they should worship. The group rejoiced together upon seeing the photo. "Yukito-sama Banzai, Yukito-sama Banzai." They continued to chant. The members began to call him their savior, a shining star of hope with divine charismatic. Noru and Naya could only watch silently in the background as they wondered what was going on. But Noru was still confused by something as he yells at them. He questions them about the reason why they saved the village even though they were the ones that attacked it in the first place. Haps hears this and decides to answer him. She tells her that in order to get followers, she needed to do this. Muscle Mommy was curious about the followers and asks her to explain. Haps tells her that formerly this country was ruled by an emperor and a parliament in the imperial capital, and that was when her young brother appeared suddenly like a comet. Then all of a sudden the emperor was crushed all at once. Kayamaru was impressed to hear this news. She nods her head slightly as she tells them that it was expected of her Yukito to be able to take the king's head all by himself, and because of that, after the emperor's death, to become the strongest soldier in the country. The archons have begun to fight for power in various places. Haps tells her that she was one of them, but Kayamaru interrupts her by saying that she was a bit weak. Haps tells her that wouldn't have lost against anyone else but her. She continues to explain that an archon's power grows with the number of followers, so the archon desperately created a cult and started to gather followers. Her members once again rejoiced out loud that they were her followers. They shouted out that they follow those who they admire and respect, so they decided to follow Haps. Kayamaru began to think about what Haps said. She realized that in this country there is an internal conflict for power between religious groups. "Screw you, for such a selfish reason," shouted Noru. He tells them with a fierce voice that attacking a village and setting it on fire was unacceptable. Haps shrugs him off and asked him if he was with Muscle Mommy. Noru tells her that he wasn't, but before they could start fighting it out, Muscle Mommy tells them to wait a minute. She tells them that the reason behind everything was because of her younger brother. She closes her eyes and informs them that it was the sister's job to clean up her brother's mess, but if it's cute Yukito's butt, I'll lick it up instead of wiping it. Muscle Mommy says these words as her mouth begun to drool upon thinking about it. Once again, I repeat, this is what the author wrote, not me. Licking, 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 she repeated, every inch of it, before giving off a creepy laugh. This is what the author wrote. Everyone continued to stare in silence upon hearing those words. Noru started to sweat as he wondered what he meant by that. Muscle Mommy grips her hand tightly, telling them that she finally knows what to do. She will smash all the archons and unite this country, she said with a lustful and drooling look on her face. Noru was shocked to hear that, but Kayamaru continues to talk about when her younger brother would become the ruler. He will create a law that brother and sister must become husband and wife. Once again, I repeat, author wrote this, not voice of Manhwa. Her face blushes heavily as she drools over the thought of Yukito and her getting married. An image of Muscle Mommy in a wedding dress carrying her younger brother in princess style came up in her mind. Noru was too stunned to speak as every hole on his face opened wide with a shock expression. But Haps and her followers simply rejoiced out loud and cheered Kayamaru on with her vision, saying let's do it. They began to chant her name out loud as she stood still. Noru continued to watch from the back in silence, but he soon realizes that he was getting tired of this. He tells them to do as they pleased and informs Naya that they should go home, but a hand touches his shoulder and tells him to wait. Kayamaru tells him that she needed him to do something which will be fun. Noru was nervous about what she wanted him to do. A few days later, a simple cottage house is seen in the lands. Two little girls could be seen together on the floor. Two other girls appear and are watching closely to what they were doing. The pair of hands on the legs started to glow brightly. Naya lets out a deep breath, and tells them with a smile on her face that she was fine now and that the wound is healed. The red-haired girl was surprised to see that the burns she had that were so bad was finally healed and back to normal. She hugs Naya to thank her and tells her that she loves her. But Naya tells her that she couldn't accept this since everyone in the village had helped her since she was blind. But the girls cheered her up by that, saying that being able to heal injuries was amazing. They continued to praise her for having such incredible powers and wondered how Naya was able to do it, as it was a mystery. They then changed the topic to Noru. They asked Naya where he was. Naya informs them that Noru seemed busy these days and was often away from home. The girls couldn't believe it and wondered if he was having an affair. But a girl said that it was impossible. It was because Noru was in love with Naya. The other girls agreed, but Naya was hesitant about it. But they continued to tell her that she might never know it. She explains to the group of girls that they say that men think with the lower half of the body, since it was written in a forbidden book. The girls began to ponder about the words lower half. Naya hears this and remains silent before calling up to the girls. Please take me now to where Kayamaru-san is, she said. Noru, good luck boy. Muscle Mommy could be seen gathering a bunch of men together. The other men continued to stare at her. Hey, you bastards, she shouted at them. Are you sure you want to keep living like this? She shouted as she continued to stand firm in front of them. She continued to ask them questions about whether they were really satisfied with their current life of oppression, and if they wanted power, but the villagers told her that they weren't. But Muscle Mommy ignores their opinions, shouting at them that she was going to transform them stupids into the most powerful fighting force in the world. She tells them that they were going to begin training. The first thing was to unify everyone's hearts and minds. She proceeds to tell them to shout with her, the best, little brother. Noru could be seen with a group of men dressed the same. They raised their wooden poles and chanted after Muscle Mommy, the best, little brother. The girl group could only stare at Noru and the men group as they continued to chant together, the best, little brother. Naya looked concerned as she wondered what this was. A mysterious person appeared in the village the other day. It was Kayamura-san. Naya didn't have any particular reason for it, but she had a feeling that she can change something. A suffocating feeling. With a raised fist, Muscle Mommy tells them that they will destroy all archons and control the imperial city. In other words, let's conquer this country. She yells at more men equipped with spears appeared in uniform positions behind her. She continues to shout out to the heavens, if you want power, follow me. I'll make you the strongest fighting group. But the group of villagers just stood still. They whispered amongst themselves about how the imperial city is under control, and about the archons who were the ones who burned down the village the other day. They thought it was impossible for them to beat the archons and wondered what Kayamura was thinking about. But somebody steps forward in the crowd. It was Naya. She looks up to Kayamura and questions her about whether she had any idea about what she was doing fighting an archon. Muscle Mommy looks at her and soon realizes who Naya was. She tells her that she was going to find out soon. She sends a command out, ordering all of them to get in position. "Ha!" shouted the group of men as they moved quick. Noru led the group as they talked about how it was time to demonstrate what they've been training for. Noru looks to the sidelines and tells Naya to watch him and what he could do. "I think our boy forgot that Naya was blind." Awkward. Naya was nervous but agrees to it. Noru gets amped up as he wanted to show Naya his cool side. His eyes began to twitch widely and his face was blushed as he began to think about how this was the perfect opportunity to make her think Noru is so cool. Shields were then slammed down onto the ground. Muscle Mommy was satisfied with this. She stands in front of the group of men, positioned uniformly and with shields in front of them. She then orders them to have a mock battle, and called for Haps. A familiar foot appears in front of us. Haps had appeared on the battleground alongside with her followers. She smiles as she giggles Kayamura's name with joy. The group of men grew nervous upon the sight of Haps as she asked Muscle Mommy permission to do as she pleased. Kayamura smiles and tells her she didn't care, but instead should give it everything she got. The men started to grow nervous and panicky upon hearing those exchange of words between them. "Good. It's Onee-sama's order." She shouted at her men, "All of you, crush them, do it." She orders as she yells. Her band of merry brothers shouted in joy and began to rush forward to crush the other group. The villagers began to panic as they witnessed the sight of Hap's group rushing towards them. They asked one another about what they should do and that Hap's group would kill them if they did nothing. Noru tells everyone to calm down and to do what they were trained to do. The men agreed with Noru's words and tells each other to get ready. Soon enough, the shields they each held were slammed against one another, creating a massive wall of protection for the group of villagers. They kneeled behind the newly formed shields, waiting for the upcoming attacks. Hap's followers laugh at the villagers' combination of wooden shields, asking them if they thought they could stop them with that. A smile grows on one of their faces as they shouted that they would destroy that, with force, they shouted. Once they slammed their bodies against the combination of wooden shields. "Aura, aura, aura," they yelled continuously as they attacked the wooden shields non-stop. The villagers could barely hold on against the attacks before a hand is raised in the air. Muscle Mommy appears and issues a new command, "Spear posture." She yelled out. Noru and others could be seen following the command immediately. Spears poked out from in between the combination of wooden shields. Hap's men were surprised to see this and wondered what this was. They were shocked to see that the spears were coming out from the gaps in the shields. One after another, Hap's men yelled out that they couldn't get any closer as the villagers continued to poke them with their spears. Muscle Mommy then issues a new command, V-shaped battle formation. The villagers agreed immediately and started to change their formations. Kayamura commentated that real wars are fought with weapons. However, the one who knows how to use the weapons better wins. The villagers had managed to successfully form a barricade made up of their wooden shields to corner Haps and her group into the middle. Haps' followers were alarmed to realize that the villagers were actually pretty tough to deal with. Haps wore an annoyed expression on her face due to her situation. She lets out a fiery explosion that causes her allies to jump out of the way due to its hotness. She smirks and tells her troops that she was enough to beat the group of villagers. She continues to show off her flaming powers in front of the villager group. The villagers could only stare with their mouths wide open. They argued with one another about what to do as Haps came closer to them. Kayamura begins to speak out about being on the battlefield. She asks the crowd from before about what was the most effective weapon, a sword, a spear, a shovel. The answer is, the flashback ends as Haps shouts at the villagers, telling them that she was going to turn all of them into charcoal. But something quick speeds through the air. An arrow had landed directly into the forehead of Haps. A look of confusion came over her as she was stunned about what was going on right now. Even her group of followers were shocked to witness what just happened. Silence fell upon the battlefield as everyone was too stunned to speak. Her followers began to crowd around her, slowly calling out her name. Kayamura announces that the most powerful weapon on the battlefield is always a flying one. Just as a female ninja with two big reasons to like her appears, hiding in the trees with a bow drawn, everyone on the battlefield looked up to the female ninja and stared at her in silence. Muscle Mommy explains to them that if the arrow was real, Haps would have been dead, so the result was a victory for the villagers' team. The villagers rejoiced with pride upon hearing the results, while Haps couldn't believe it. She throws the arrow down and started to curse. "Shit, shit, shit," she yells as she stomps her foot repeatedly onto the arrow. The villagers who were watching were speechless. But they soon realized something even though they couldn't understand it very well. but under Kayamaru's guidance, simple villagers were able to defeat an archon. Night soon arrives in the world. So, what did you think, Naya? Shouted a voice from inside of a house. Noru tells her that they had defeated an archon as his face was filled with excitement, but Naya was hesitating to reply him. Afterwards she tells him that she couldn't really understand what he was doing. This shocks Noru, but he soon realizes Naya was right as she literally couldn't see anything. Naya went to comfort Noru as Kayamaru asked him if his stomach hurts. Hap stood at attention and wanted to ask her something. She asks her if it was okay to pretend to lose like that. Muscle Mommy tells her that it was alright and that she did a good job. Noru was shocked to hear that. He questions them about whether the entire fight was an act. Kayamaru tells him that it was. She tells Noru that even though Hap's group was weak, they wouldn't have lost against the villagers. Haps agrees with her. Noru drops to his knees and was sad over this fact. He had really believed that they had beaten an archon, but Kayamaru tells him that it was possible. This piques his interest as he looks up. She tells him that they didn't have enough time, but with a real armed force, they can win. She explains to him that where he came from, someone who could shoot flames out of the hand would be killed in an instant. An image of a man holding the power of America is seen blasting Hap's head. Haps was alarmed to hear this. She questions Muscle Mommy if this was true. Naya started to speak out as well. She asks her if she could become stronger too, strong enough to not be defeated by the archons. Of course, said Muscle Mommy, miracles are created by force. She says with a look of confidence in her eye and a smile on her face. The sun rises on a new day. A nice-looking Japanese's temple is seen. A group of muscular men with masks are seen kneeling on the ground. Who, said a voice from some sweet lips. A new mommy appears. This was the archon called Kama/Mara. She asks her followers if Hephaestus was defeated by humans. She tells her followers that after all, someone with the name of a lower god is insignificant. She proclaims herself as the Mao, who will control the empire. The scene begins in a ruined village. Glass's mommy is seen showing a group of men some reasons to like her. All the men started to breath heavily. Seeing their reactions causes Kama if they wanted to violate her that badly. I have to censor this part. Sorry boys. Kama had lifted her shirt up, revealing 2 reasons to like her even more. She looks at the group of men in front of her, calling them disgusting. She also pointed out that unlike the people of the Imperial City, she knows that they have libido. She questions if it had been accumulated. Kama then gives them permission to do what they want to her body. Hearing those words send the guys into a mad flurry. But before they could taste the divine fruit, a string instantly snaps itself into the neck of one of the men. More string started to appear and stuck itself into more of the me. Soon enough, the men stopped moving and started to hang in the air like puppets. With their hands on the ground, all the men in front of Kama started to enter a bowing position. Seeing the men act this way brings a smile to Kama's face as laughs. She steps on the man in front of her with strings attached to her back. She looks at them and tells them that dominating small fish like them is really pleasurable. Back to Kayamaru's intense training regime. Her squad is seen doing push-ups while she monitors them. Looking fierce, she soon shouts a cheer, Otudo, Saiku, which translates to Lil Bro is the best. As the men continued to do their push-ups, they followed along to her cheers. They shouted out as well, Otudo, Saiku. They soon changed the cheers to miracles are done by force. Miracles are done by force. And afterwards a really weird cheer. The siblings will get married. The siblings will get married. Noru soon collapses onto the ground, tired from all the push-ups. He questions whether they could really get strong by training like this. Haps appeared with a mug in her hand. She asks Noru if he had any complaints about the way Kayamaru was doing things. What if I have? Replied Noru as he tells Haps that he hadn't forgiven her for what she did, but she then offers him the mug she brought. She kneels directly in front of him, asking him to drink up all the water in the mug, warning him if that he doesn't hydrate himself, he would collapse. Noru was too stunned to speak. He soon accepts the mug and agrees to her orders. Haps then turns to her own group of lackeys, ordering them to take a proper break as well. OSU shouted her group up in response. She then lectures them that as long as they follow Kayamaru's training, everything will be fine. Right, Onee-sama? She asked as she turns to Kayamaru, who stood behind her. Kayamaru agrees with her, further stating that 3 sets of 20 push-ups a day if they keep doing that every day. But a member of the group cuts her off by suddenly screaming. Other members of the group started to panic as there was a sudden appearance of a monster. They all cried out for help, telling one another to run and that they didn't want to die. But Kayamaru simply stood in the same spot as everyone tried to run away from the monster. The monster soon lets out a fierce roar, but Kayamaru simply replies back with a powerful punch straight into its body. This is why she is our muscle mommy. All hail muscle mommy. The monster was left too stunned to speak as its saliva simply drooled out from its mouth after being hit by Kayamaru. It soon collapses onto the ground after that single blow. The members of the group stood still as they witnessed a miracle, an act of muscle mommy. With their mouths wide open, Kayamaru then continues to lecture them from where she left off. She tells them that if they kept doing push-ups, then anyone will be able to do what she just did, but the members were pretty sure that it was impossible for them. Haps, on the other hand, continues to be impressed by Kayamaru. She then questions her about the reason in creating a combat group, as she was sure that Kayamaru was able to defeat any enemy by herself. Kayamaru disagrees with Haps, telling her that war is not so sweet, and that there are a lot of people who are stronger than her. In fact, she has never won a single match against her own little brother. Haps was shocked to learn this surprising fact from Muscle Mommy. She was silent for a moment but asked if it was because she went easy on her little brother. Kayamaru continues to tell her that at her current level, she was still no match for her younger brother, because he was a master of the softness style. An image of her younger brother in the dojo is seen. Surrounding him were the beaten members of the dojo who laid unconsciousness on the ground. Haps continues to be surprised at the fact that her weak-looking younger brother was actually stronger than her. The scene switches back to the modern world of Japan. Kayamaru tells the story of how she was the one who taught Yukito martial arts. She states that you could call her style Go, which means rigid, while her younger brother Yukito's style is Ju, which means soft. We now witness a legendary battle between siblings. Kayamaru is seen preparing herself against Yukito, but upon closer look, her face was perverted as hell. Look at that amount of drool coming out from her mouth. She looks at Yukito with lustful eyes and ill intentions. She spoke these words to him: Onee-chan will train you personally. With her hand stretched out, she tells Yukito to come to her. This version of Warabe Yukito is when he was a junior high school student. He stood in front of Kayamaru with a calm expression on his face, but sweat started to drip down his face as he tells Kayamaru that he doesn't want to. He explains to her that she was being so creepy whenever she wanted to do kumite with him, but Kayamaru was breathing intensely, drooling even more as she shouts at Yukito to not hold back. Yukito tells her that he wasn't holding back as he really didn't want to do this with her. Hearing those words made Kayamaru snap. Quit babbling, she shouts at him. She then decides to lunge towards Yukito herself, telling him that since he wouldn't come to her, she'll come to him. Here I come, she yells as she flies through the air. Yukito could only show a defeated expression on his face as she flew towards him. A sudden bang sound could be heard in the air as someone started to grunt hard. What is this technique?" shouted Kayamaru as a shadow was cast over her face. She complains that even though she was a master, she couldn't break free. What the hell? But all Yukito did was stare at her with dead eyes. She continues to call out to him, questioning him about when he had gotten this good. Wrong, shouted Yukito back at her. He tells her that if she used force, she would be able to overcome him with ease. But Kayamaru tells him that she couldn't as they continued to hold each other tightly on the ground. This is where things get really weird. The author wrote this. I repeat, the author wrote this. Kayamaru began to become even more lustful after Yukito as her infamous drool started to drip down her mouth. Grip me tighter. You're wrong. I don't care if the bottom half of your body goes in a little. Violate. Violate me. Yukito continued to wear a defeated expression on his face. His thoughts were filled with the fact that he couldn't take this anymore. His sister in the cult. He then looks at his sister, telling her that he would do whatever she says. Hearing those words from him caused Kayamaru to stop. She looks at him with open eyes, repeating his words into her mind about how he would do whatever for her. Her followers remained stunned and silent after hearing that story from Kayamaru. She further explains that what Yukito said at that moment, that was undoubtedly a marriage proposal. In other words, at that time, Muscle Mommy and Yukito had gotten engaged. Just the thought of them being engaged was enough for Kayamaru to drool so heavily that her shirt and pants were starting to get wet. She continues to give off a look on her face as if she had reached the peak of pleasure. Even her eyes started to roll backwards into her skull as she continued to reminisce that scene with her younger brother. Her followers were concerned upon seeing her in that state. They call out to her asking her if she was okay, but all Kayamaru said was Yukito's name. Haps looks at her with a confused look, wondering if what Yukito said to her was actually a marriage proposal. Kayamaru soon snaps out from her perverted delusion, telling them that in contrast to her go, which is pure force, Ju, which her younger brother has mastered, is a fighting style that does not rely on force. It includes not only martial arts, but also political negotiations and tactical tricks. The power of knowledge. Naya looks up in silence, before thinking about how it was about skills that does not rely on power. She soon grabs onto Kayamaru's shirt. She begs her to teach her the technique of Ju. Kayamaru looks at her and agrees to her request. She then tells Naya that she can do it right away and decides to give her an example. Noru is seen sitting by himself on the grassy patch, drinking water. He talks out loud to himself, stating that he was starting to look like an idiot, questioning the point behind this kind of training. Naya soon appears behind him and calls out to him, "Noru," she says, before hugging him tightly from the back. This causes him to open his eyes wide. "Good luck, Noru," Naya whispers as she held his head close to her in their close embrace. She continues to tell him that she had high hopes for him. Hearing those words combined with her hug started to cause a change within the little boy. His heart started to beat like an engine. His eyes were ignited with a new profound meaning. He slams his feet hard onto the ground as he stood up. "Whoa! Here I come!" Noru shouted as he stood tall. "Demons, snakes, or archons. Anything! Bring it on!" shouted Noru with all his might. Even Naya was amazed by Noru's sudden courage to face everything this world has to offer. Kayamaru and Haps continued to watch him shout. This brings a smile to Kayamaru's face as she calls it the power of love, which was immense. Just like her love for her younger brother Yukito, a member of Haps' group appears with urgency. He reports to her that he had bad news from a neighboring village. He informs her that a huge cult is rapidly expanding its control in this area these days, and that at this rate, they would be surrounded. Haps was alarmed to hear this information, but Kayamaru tells her that it was convenient. She explains to them that this was their chance to expand the size of their army. Haps was confused by what she meant. Kayamaru then turns to her and explains that if the cult was such a big organization, then they should defeat it and take over the whole thing. Another mommy in this world is seen looking down at the village where Kayamaru is. She wore a smile on her face. Glasses mommy versus muscle mommy. Comment below your favorite.
We now change scenes to a well-drawn map placed on the ground. Hep was introducing it as a map of the Imperial Kingdom. She explains to everyone that the center of the kingdom was the great Imperial City, and that there were numerous small villages called Kakiri surrounding the Imperial City. But as she explains the map, loud punching noises could be heard in the background, counting towards 1,000. Hep continues to point out that one of the villages was being used by the archons to increase the number of believers. She reveals that the most common pattern is to attack a Kakiri and conquer it. But then the punches became even louder, reaching 999. Hep finally snaps and shouts at Chio, asking her if she was even listening to the lecture she was giving. With one final punch, Chio had finally killed one more monster in a single blow, letting her reach 1,000 punches. With stacks of dead monsters piled up and her body pumped, Chio informs Hep that she was listening the entire time. Once again, the young girl and boy were stunned by what Chio was doing during the lecture. Noru was questioning her on why she would waste her time by coming all the way to such a place where there was a huge population of monsters and killing thousands of them. The followers of Chio called Noru an idiot for questioning what Chio was doing. They argued that she was going to eat the monsters she kills or tear off their heads and use them as an accessory. They continued to argue with one another, causing Noru to panic over what they were going to do. Ignoring their words, Chio tells Hep to continue her briefing, pulling up the map once again. Hep informs everyone that in their Kakiri, there seems to be a group of people calling themselves the Mars cult, and are taking over the surroundings Kakuris one by one at an incredible speed. Hearing about the Mars cult drew Chio's attention, so Hep tells her that it was probably an archon, but also revealed that the archons didn't even know about one another, so even she doesn't know who Mara is. Raising her hand, Lisa figured out that the fact that the Mars cult were rapidly expanding their powers meant that they were using some heavy-handed methods such as armed suppression. Hep was impressed by Lisa's intelligence, calling the others idiots like Noru. But stepping in, she tells everyone that what the Mara cult was doing wasn't military suppression, but some sort of mind control. Which isn't that unusual, as there were many ways to brainwash people. Chio chimes in, telling everyone that if you can take control of the economy or resources, then they would be able to usurp the leadership position. In any case, she knew that if things continue on like this, they would have to fight against a force 10 times more powerful. Everyone started to sweat after hearing that from Chiyo and the fact that they might have to fight against a force 10 times larger than their own. But Chiyo reassures them that it was going to be okay, as she was going to teach them one way to protect themselves. She also knew of a way to counter brainwashing, as it was a matter of mental strength. She tells her believers that they need to first train their bodies. When the body is strengthened, the mind also becomes stronger. With these two, an unshakable power will be born. Chiyo even tells everyone that she couldn't be brainwashed, because of her love for her brother, there was no room for anything else in her mind. Chiyo's believers were hyped up, calling what Chiyo felt for her own brother as true love. They started to chant her name in unison. As they did, Lisa calls out to Noru, telling him that although Chiyo was a bit scary, she could feel that she was a good person. As Hep started to join in to praise Chiyo, a mighty fist landed onto her beautiful face, sending her flying far away as the other believers were shocked by what they just witnessed. Chiyo, for some weird reason, seems to have snapped her mind as she screams out randomly. Her followers tried to get her to regain her mind, but it was no use as she continues to scream like a battle cry. Sensing the danger coming from her, the followers started to panic and run as Chiyo uses one of them as a bat to smack the poop out of the others. It turns out that her mind was filled with Yuki, knocking everyone out and shouting out his name. She declared that she will do anything for him. Lisa and Noru were the only ones standing, and finally realized that Chiyo was the actual devil. Lisa and Noru continued to stand still as Chiyo hunted down every single one of her followers that were present in the field. They all laid on the ground, completely knocked out except for Hep, who still couldn't understand why Chiyo was doing what she was doing to them. It turns out that for some reason, Chiyo's mind was completely filled with Yuki inside. She repeatedly says his name, one after the other, till her face becomes a meme. The night before, at Lisa and Noru's house where Chiyo was staying, Maru was there, sneaking up on their roof like a ninja. She figured out that the village leader, Chiyo, was currently staying in this house. Using her thread, she inserts one of them into the house to do some recon. She could see everything that was inside of the house as the thread was connected to her eye. But as she scans the room, she wonders where Chiyo was until she comes across a paper on a wall with the words "Big Sis Love." There were other pieces of paper stuck to the wall, with words written on it such as "Miracles are done by force, brother and sister marriage uncertain." Looking at these weird papers, even Maru was creeped out by them. Soon enough, she came across some photos of Yuki, before finding Chiyo, who was standing in the middle of the room with her eyes closed and surrounded by Yuki's photos everywhere. It turns out that Chiyo was actually asleep, drooling heavily. Maru was stunned by this sight, seeing Chiyo asleep while standing. But it works in her favor, as her threads weave themselves into the human consciousness, it brainwashes and turns them into a puppet, which was her ability called Saber Maru One-et. Seeing Chiyo's vulnerable state, Maru goes in for the kill, aiming for the back of her neck. But Chiyo's eyes opened instantly, sensing the danger, but to Mara, it was pointless now, cause even if she wakes up now, Maru's thread's speed exceeds the speed of sound. Guess who's faster than the speed of sound, cause our muscle mommy manages to catch the thread with ease in her ease. Looking at it, she wonders what this thread was as Maru stares in disbelief. Chiyo could sense that the speed of the thread was similar to the speed of a rifle bullet, but she recounts that if you train in martial arts, then you could grab bullets with your bare hands easily. This was all according to Ueshiba Morihei, the founder of Aikido, who could easily dodge bullets. Maru was in disbelief after seeing that reaction from Chiyo, but she gains her confidence back, knowing that her thread is ethereal and can penetrate through anything. That turns out to be a lie as Chiyo causally just bitch slaps the through onto the floor, smacking it easily with just one of her palms. Bring in the memes as Maru was completely shocked by Chiyo's actions this time. According to Chiyo, as long as you have trained in martial arts, then you can punch an ethereal body with your bare hands easily. This was said by Minamoto no Yorimitsu, a general from the Heian period who had defeated many monsters with brute force. Panic starts to set into Maru as she screams, panicking on the roof and wondering what exactly was Chiyo made out of as it didn't make sense to her. Not willing to give up, she decides that instead of brainwashing her this time, she was at least going to take away her freedom of movement. The thread attack works this time as Maru aims her Chiyo's ankle from the back. She definitely felt that attack as her eyes started to widen before slowly closing. The next thing she knew, she found herself in her underwear, surrounded by flowers, with Yuki standing naked right in front of her. Seeing her precious younger brother brought a smile across her face as she screams his name before leaping right at him, instantly shedding all of her clothes within seconds. Warning, The following scenes may seem disturbing to some viewers. Leave now, but don't forget to like and subscribe to support the channel. Wasting no time at all, Chio body slams her naked body onto Yuki without hesitation. Her dream had finally come through. Chio had completed the cycle of life by merging with her younger brother. Or in her words, fusion complete. Sitting on top of Yuki, Chio's wish has now been fulfilled. The Yuki in her dream didn't even try to resist her moves. Instead, he asked her if she could listen to his request. Even after snapping awake from the dream, Chio still accepts the fake Yuki's request. Back to Maru, she couldn't believe that she had done it. Somehow, she was able to brainwash Chio through her feet, but it still made no sense to her. Chio's physical body was invincible to a degree that makes no sense, but against a mental attack, she somehow has no defense against it. But in the end, it didn't matter to Maru, as she now could control Chio whenever she wanted. Which leads us back to the scene where Chio knocked everyone out. In her demon mode, Lisa tries her best to call out to Chio, begging her to come back to her senses, but it was useless. Maru had made her appearance, being carried by her muscular men with masks on. Noru was stunned to see her this way, even finding the time to insult her by saying she dresses like an idiot. Ignoring his words, Maru reveals to everyone that Chio was currently under her control, an archon. Hep finally gained the strength to sit upright, and couldn't believe that Maru was an archon like her too. Hearing those words coming from her felt like an insult, as she didn't want to be compared to a loser like Hep. Stepping down from her seat, Maru declares herself as Karma Mara, the only supreme god. She knew that Hep's entire group were nothing without Chio, making them completely powerless. So she gives them a choice, to either surrender themselves to her right now and join her side, or die at the very hands of the woman they worship.
Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.